Egypt and Tunisia agreed to make 2022-23 a year of activating economic cooperation between the two countries and to activate a maritime shipping line between both sides. This came during Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli's official visit to Tunisia last week, where he and Tunisian Prime Minister Najla Boudin co-chaired the Egyptian-Tunisian Economic Forum, as well as the 17th session of the Egyptian-Tunisian Joint Higher Committee on Bilateral Cooperation. At a ceremony upon the conclusion of the 17th session of the Egyptian-Tunisian Joint Higher Committee and in the presence of both prime ministers, both countries signed 11 agreements to strengthen bilateral cooperation. The agreements aimed at strengthening bilateral relations in the fields of international cooperation, markets, export and agriculture. These agreements also cover the fields of higher education, scientific research, communication technology, information, meteorology, climate, housing and construction, as well as information exchange between financial authorities. Prime Minister Madbouli underlined both governments' key role to improve the business environment, facilitate the movement of economic actors, the flow of goods, and the rapid intervention to overcome all obstacles that might hinder the access of commodities and products to the Egyptian and Tunisian markets. Madbouli hailed the important role played by the Egyptian-Tunisian Economic Forum and the Egyptian-Tunisian Higher Committee meetings to integrate public and private sector efforts and raise the level of bilateral ties in the fields of trade exchange, cooperation and investment partnership in all economic activities. He called for establishing an immediate mechanism to issue visas for Tunisian businessmen, affirming that there are no restrictions on their movement between Tunisia and Egypt. The Prime Minister stressed that Tunisian businessmen are welcomed in Egypt. He pointed out that trade exchange indicators have dropped during the past 2 years due to the global health crisis, stressing the need to double the figures soon. For her part, Boudin called for unifying efforts and working together to further enhance the existing cooperation. She underscored the importance of the legal framework that regulates the bilateral economic relations, noting that it is one of the best frameworks both countries have concluded with their economic partners. Data released in the forum showed that trade exchange between the two countries dropped to $330 million in 2021. The total investments were estimated at $570 million by the end of 2020, which were allocated to finance 42 economic projects. Also, during his visit to Tunisia, Prime Minister Madbouli met Tunisian President Kais Saied, who has expressed his aspiration to increase cooperation between Tunisia and Egypt to achieve growth and prosperity, including non-traditional cooperation mechanisms. The Tunisian president also reiterated his country's support to Egypt in the dispute with Ethiopia on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Said stressed that Tunisia's position on the GERD is the same as Egypt's, reiterating that he would not deviate from this stance because Tunisia's security is part of Egypt's national security.
Right, welcome back, and that's our second segment. And the Egyptian-Tunisian relations are now stronger than ever, and the rapprochement taking place between both countries is unprecedented. And Dr. Fahmy, we're speaking about this important visit the Prime Minister's carried to the Tunisian side, where he led the delegation to participate in this forum, Egyptian-Tunisian Higher Committee's forum. Let me here take your, how do you view the Egyptian-Tunisian relations at this very particular time, and future relations in light of what we are seeing?
Well, I think here the economic file has to be also related to the political file. Over the past few years, Tunisia has witnessed a lot of changes, especially since the president, Kais Saied, has been sworn in Tunisia. A lot more has been happening in terms of an overlapping vision from both governments. on the major files in the region, agreement on the Libyan file, on the regional Mediterranean conflicts, on fighting radical terrorism and Islamist groups. So there's a lot of overlap here in terms of the political vision, and this facilitates the economic process. In terms of both countries, actually they share a lot of features in terms of their economies. Both countries are dependent as of yet on services sectors, on the tourist sector, or and they're not that rich in terms of energy production. Maybe Egypt is a bit more, especially after the most recent findings in Doha and other places in terms of natural gas. But yet, the economic outlook of both countries is quite similar, actually. So I think it's important in this regard. Now Egypt does have a much bigger market. It's a much bigger country in terms of its size. So I think there are opportunities for sharing lessons learned and for cooperation between both countries in fields, again, like tourism, like exchange of goods and services, some small and medium enterprises. Also, Egypt can provide Tunisia with cheaper goods as substitutes to the imports that it may be depending on from Southern European or other markets.
But before we move on to the economic side, let's take it politically, because politically is how or how things move on politically is the way how it reflects on the both economies. If we speak about the Prime Minister meeting with President Qais Said and statements that were said by the Tunisian president were very much appealing and promising and in support of Egypt and appreciating the Egyptian role. Tell me the reading of the words of Qais Said, and what does this reflect?
I think it reflects an understanding, a great deal of understanding from the Tunisian side regarding the challenges that Egypt has gone through and the threat that it's posed by groups like the Muslim Brotherhood in the case of Egypt, or Nahda in the case of Tunisia. I mean, again, both countries went through very similar stages of a popular uprising that demanded a change of regime, and then an Islamist-led group trying to co-opt the process and to more or less jump on the revolution, like what happened in both countries, and then an attempt by the people themselves to overthrow this Islamist group. And I think from the Egyptian example or experience, a lot of lessons were learned in the case of Tunisia. And I think this is what the Tunisian president is alluding to, that this was more or less a prototype that he, in his attempts to change the situation in Tunisia, depended a lot on, drawing almost inspiration from the Egyptian case, as he mentions in his statement. So I think, yeah, this is a very important starting point if we're to look at the economic ties or any kind of ties between countries, that there's this kind of mutual respect or understanding of their contexts.
So we're speaking here about that both sides agree on a same vision regarding the Middle East issues and how to work out the countries. How about the regional issues of mutual concern, and what is the kind of vision both sides look into them?
Well, the first, of course, is Libya, which is sandwiched between both countries. And I think both countries see eye to eye on the major challenges facing Libya at the moment. As we know, of course, the Libyan elections have been postponed indefinitely late last year, and to date there are still competing narratives for who is ruling Libya from the east and from the west. And this kind of instability and lack of a firm system or a clear-cut even outlook for the steps to be taken to build a system that's sustainable, that is thriving in the Libyan case, is definitely a source of concern for both countries. So again, it's very beneficial and very strategically important for Egypt that a regional partner with the level of awareness and the level of close ties also with Europe, like Tunisia, does see eye to eye with Egypt on that matter. We also have the file of the relations with Turkey, which is also very important. You know, both countries again agree on the importance of Turkey not infiltrating in the affairs of any country in the region. And I think Tunisia does also have its own experience with Al-Nahda in that regard. So they're also very sensitive to that file. Another also very important file on the agenda is the transformations or the changes happening in the Gulf region. And this is also, again, both countries see eye to eye on the importance of positive relations with countries like Saudi Arabia, with UAE, also on the Yemeni crisis. You know, I think most of the regional issues, both countries do see eye to eye on them. So this is, it's very important and very healthy for the relations and for the Arab region in North Africa as a whole.
Right. And that has reflected economic-wise, where Egypt and Tunisia agreed to make the year 2022-2023 a year of economic cooperation.
Yes.
How do you view cooperation, economic cooperation between both countries? First, the importance of such cooperation, plus what do they have in order to enhance and boost those cooperation?
You know, at a time of increasing international trade and the importance of trade liberalization, both countries are part of agreements with the World Trade Organization and with the World Bank and the IMF to further their exports. I think one of the most important points mentioned in the report is the fact that both countries agreed on establishing a functional shipping route between Egypt and Tunisia. And this will definitely help a lot also in facilitating the process of exporting Egyptian goods to Europe through Tunisia, which is only a few miles away from Italy and very close to the borders to the shores of other European countries like France and Spain and so forth. So having this direct access to Europe via Tunisia is very important. You know, Tunisia, after all, is a relatively small country, but a very important country strategically. We have also, since both countries, also talking about the political process, both countries have managed to work together and to limit the movement of people, of illegal migration happening from the northern coast of Africa. Now there is an opportunity to build on these infrastructural resources, on the ships, equipment, the technology transfer, the information sharing systems that have been taking place over the past period. This can also be utilized in furthering international trade and improving the Mediterranean security, and using these tools to actually for civilian and for economic purposes, like facilitating trade, like even tourism between both countries, very important. Egypt, again, can benefit from a Tunisian sector that also is in need of sharing lessons learned. The construction field, another major field that Egypt can help with. I mean, currently Egypt is one of the most active countries in Africa and the Arab region in terms of construction. And this can definitely help in a growing Tunisian economy that is in need of further construction, development, and so forth. And again, here there's a role for Egypt to play.
Both Egypt and Tunisia are Arab and African. From your point of view, do you think that the distinguished relations between Egypt and Tunisia at this very particular time can really carry kind of visions for promoting the Arab-Afro, Arab-Arab, African-African relation and cooperation?
Of course it can. You know, I think one of the most important and strategic shifts that we have seen recently from Egypt is in the field of Egyptian-African relationships, which have been for a very long time forgotten and almost stagnant. Now we see a clear-cut shift from Egypt in terms of it building positive relations with Africa, not only in terms of paying lip service, but also in terms of economic ties, of, as we were just talking a while back, also in terms of construction and so forth. So this presence of Egypt in the African continent can only help when there's more ties with neighboring North African countries like Tunisia. It's not only about working directly, but also about diplomatic relations, about voting processes in the African Union, about supporting membership of different countries in the different councils, in whether the economic or the political arenas in the African organization. So all of these sorts of areas of collaboration between both countries politically can only help in them building some sort of a mini bloc within the African Union.
Yes, I guess my time is out and I have to end it here. They've just told me. Dr. Mohamed Fahmy, Professor of the Middle East Politics at the AEC, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And dear viewers, many thanks for watching. I guess tomorrow would be another important debate with another colleague. Good night.